John W. Hoops, Flint Dibble, and Carl Fegans just put a paper out on Twitter that I saw that's called Apocalypse Not, and it's archaeologists responding to pseudo-archaeology. And the very last paragraph it summarizes with this sentence. If anything, it is time to change as a field and place more value on the important work of public engagement. There is a strong interest in archaeology around our world, and we need to build on existing engagement efforts in order to share real archaeology with real people. So as you can imagine, I have a few thoughts about that. Alright, so I'll go ahead and give you a quick rundown of the paper, and then I'm going to point out a couple of the things that I find particularly egregious. Basically, the paper can be summarized in kind of a call to action. It's trying to get people on board with stopping pseudo-archaeology, and it targets Graham Hancock specifically. It goes through a number of different things throughout the years, and a number of things that I would call out if I was making a full-length video on it, but I'm not. I'm just going to do a quick video. So I'll just talk about these couple of things here. And the first one is the spot that's going to have me editing vowels out of this video for 45 minutes straight, is the big old fat isms that I've always avoided saying in the video, but then I had to read it, so now I'm just going to edit it all out, because trying to read it and editing myself, that always fails. Using the R word. Racism and white supremacy have been themes in archaeology of the Americas from its inception. The first problem-oriented excavations in what is now the United States were undertaken by Thomas Jefferson, a slaveholder, to address questions about the identity of the builders of mounds in Virginia. Racist myths about mound builders have been addressed in detail in books by non-archaeologists and archaeologists. Racist literature includes popular 19th century publications by author Josiah Priest, especially American Antiquities and Discoveries in the West. Priest was a hyperdiffusionist, attributing archaeological remains in North America to almost anyone other than native people. The notion of a mound builder culture different from the ancestors of living native people biased the work of Ephraim D. Squire and Edward H. Davis. It was supposedly put to rest by Cyrus Thomas and John Wesley Powell, yet still persists. Racist ideas in early American archaeology that harmed indigenous peoples throughout the Americas continues to this day. Archaeologists are still coming to terms with our own racist history, past and present. However, it is precisely because of this knowledge that the SAA has become a staunch advocate for the protections of indigenous sites, collaboration and consultation with indigenous communities and other stakeholders in archaeology, and the repatriation of Native American objects. Pseudo-archaeology can perpetuate racist and white supremacist tropes of Victorian anthropology. These include hyperdiffusionism and models for unitary origin of civilization that typically attribute civilization to white people and not others. Frank Collin, a former neo-Nazi activist who wrote books about Atlantis, Lemuria, and other fringe topics, favors white identities for advanced civilizations and was a founding editor of Ancient America's magazine, which promotes hyperdiffusionism. Italian businessman Marco Vigato, author of Empires of Atlantis, and a featured expert in ancient apocalypse, proposes a separate evolution of Homo Atlanticanus, a hybrid race of humans and biblical Nephilim, and presents a theosophical argument for a superior Aryan root race on Atlantis. Throughout Fingerprints of the Gods, Hancock identifies Quetzalcoatl and Viracocha, foreign heroes, as white and/or Caucasian, citing Ignatius Donnelly and Constance Irwin's Fair Gods and Stone Faces, about which one reviewer wrote, "It is clear that there is nothing scientifically valid about this book." And right out the gate, they pull a little sleight of hand. Yes, Donnelly is cited in Hancock's book, Fingerprint of the Gods, but Quetzalcoatl / Viracocha was considered a white civilizer, and that Cortez was supposed to be him and mistaken for him. When I was a kid, you were taught that in school. This has been like a mainstream thing until fairly recently. So Hancock wasn't citing some horrible Donnelly. He was just saying what at the time was considered to be common knowledge. But they can't really do what they did there, which notice what they did there. They went from archaeology has this horrible history to we're not so bad anymore. Hancock has a horrible history. See, look at this guy that's kind of like him, and this other guy that was on one of his episodes, and this other guy that he cited once in the book, and all those guys are really bad. We're not so bad anymore, but he still is. As a matter of fact, he's horrible. And it's like, look, archaeology is working with freaking indigenous people like you guys cite now and whatnot, and that's great. It's actually fixing a lot of the problems of the past, or at least trying to. Hancock's in kind of the same boat, man. He ain't got nothing to do with those old isms, and you all know that. Now, somebody else might latch on to it, but it doesn't, you can't stop that. No matter what you do, those kinds of people are going to be like, oh, you've got two different kinds of music, and I attribute one to this race and one to that one. This one's better because I like it. This is going to happen no matter what you do. So, back in those days, archaeology had that problem, Atlantis hunting had that problem, politics had that problem, everything had that problem way more than it does today. So this is really disingenuous and it's demonizing, but for their call to action, it sure is good because, boy, if you can, I mean, how hard can you bully someone who's got that label? But the next thing to me is even more egregious because, well, just listen to this.
What's the harm in pseudo-archaeology? Professional archaeologists encounter varying degrees of pseudo-archaeology in day-to-day work. Professors and museologists are approached to identify a rock that looks something like an artifact. Landowners may request CRM archaeologists to locate shovel tests based on downsizing. An uncle at a family gathering may be among the 38% of Americans who believes the Earth was visited by extraterrestrials in the past. What's the harm? Pseudo-archaeology erodes public trust in archaeologists and science. In 2022, a Pew Research Center survey indicated that only 29% of U.S. adults had significant confidence in medical science with respect to public health, down from 40% in 2020. Archaeology is not medicine. Cultural heritage matters for reinforcing indigenous, local, and national identities, pursuing scientific knowledge, promoting education, supporting museums and tourism, and contributing to the greater good. The rise of anti-science beliefs threatens cultural heritage just as it does medical science.
Well, I want you to think back to 2020 to 2022. Do you have any memory of what happened back then? Was it pretty volatile online when, like, a lot of people lost faith in the medical community? Now, whether you agree with all that stuff or not, I don't really care. That's not my problem, and that's not my point of this channel. My thing is, they're trying to blame Hancock for that number, and that number is directly related to that viral mess. And we all know that. Anybody with a brain on their shoulders looks at those years, looks at what field of science it is that's being questioned. Like, well, yeah, but that's what that came from. But no, they're not going to admit that. They're going to pin that on Hancock. Why wouldn't they pin that on Hancock? Absolutely absurd. But let me say something here, like I mentioned about the isms. You can't stop this, okay? You're always going to have those people that are like, oh man, check it out. It's like we're like living on a planet, right? But maybe science is wrong, and it's like every atom is like a flea on the back of a giant dog, and like the world is the giant. I mean, you're always going to have pseudoscience bullshit, okay? You're not going to get around that. What you can do is combat it by how you conduct yourselves. Since we're using the medical community as an example here, I want to show you something that could have been done differently that would have changed those numbers. Seen this image here? These kinds of images? We've all seen those kinds of images for the last few years. And they're always posted by people who have a particular opinion about the medical community. And why is that? Well, there's two sides to this coin, like everything that I talk about. On the one hand, you have somebody who's like, okay, we're going to have this orchestra, we're going to have all these people get together. If we make them look like they're all together, even though these people have to be able to use their mouths in order to do their job, and these people need their mouths covered in order to protect everybody, we're going to do this so it looks like we're all together. Solidarity, it's like a uniform. We're together, we're one, we're doing this together, facing it. I get where they were coming from, but they didn't think about the other side of the coin. There was a little hubris maybe, a little arrogance, maybe some ivory tower, I don't really know. But what I do know is that was really, really dumb, because what ended up happening was it was latched onto as proof that this was bullshit. And then you can't unring that bell. You're never ever, look, they don't even care about it. They don't even wear a mask. They'll blow spit all over the damn place. So you can't get around these things once you've let that cat out of the bag. So for the scientific community, the archaeological community that's trying to get rid of Hancock's woo and is trying to combat pseudoscience, the thing for you guys to do is to actually like know what you're talking about when you go to debunk Hancock. And I don't mean in archaeology, but like know what his claims are, which are frequently subtle and like scattered throughout numerous works, or don't bother. That's where the first thing. And the second thing would be to like not treat this like it's some flat earther bullshit, because when you do that and then somebody like me can come along and just start picking things apart, I'm just doing it publicly. If you think that I'm the first person that's looked at these arguments and pulled them apart, you're fucking crazy. This has been happening for a very long, as long as these arguments have been showing up, people have been pulling them apart. So when you do that, you damage your credibility irreparably. So stop that. Take responsibility for the things you can take, and quit screaming and yelling at the people that you can't change. We're all going to have like different standards of evidence and different things that we find compelling and different things that are like important to us when it comes to this stuff. Recognize that. Recognize that yours isn't the only one. So if, for example, if archaeoastronomy is something that you think is a bunch of bogus bullshit, understand that Graham Hancock fans don't feel that way. So maybe don't treat it like a bunch of bogus bullshit when you talk to Graham Hancock fans and you're trying to debunk them. Because when you do that, we just say, okay, well, we disagree with that. This is a branch of science you don't like, and I do like, so okay. And then you talk right past us. Same thing with a lot of the dating stuff. You need to be aware of that. If we think it's going to be much older than it is, and you're like, well, the earliest carbon dated material that we found on the outside of that big old stone structure was, it's like, man, go somewhere else with it. Know where our brains are going to be on this shit. Come on. Don't be stupid about it. Don't be arrogant about it. Get out of your ivory towers for a second. Look at things from our perspective. Pretend it's a chess game. And think about what our next 5 moves are going to be. Jeez. Please. Sorry, this is just frustrating as hell. It's like you treat us like we're a bunch of mouth breathers, and then you're like, oh my God, it's so dangerous that all this is going on. It's like, don't treat us like mouth breathers. Like science. Well, that's enough ranting about this. My next video is almost done, and it's very, very much tied to this subject. So have a good evening, and we'll see you soon.
Hadouken! Hadouken! Hadouken!